The thin, fair gates of the Canadian Rail Transit Authority? Are they built for dogs? They look like gates meant for a dog to pass through. A stir swept through the Parisian television studio. Commentators snickered, and the audience burst into hearty laughter. On the screen, a shot of Toronto's Union Station during the morning rush hour played people moving in an orderly stream, the slender gates quietly opening and closing. This is supposed to be world-class rail. Are you joking? The speaker shrugging her shoulders was Alice Durand, a lead engineer for SNCF French National Railways. She folded her arms with a look of superiority, a provocative smile playing on her lips. Our TGV uses much sturdier barriers. A child could jump over those things. The host chimed in. Indeed, the door on my own doghouse is probably more robust. The audience roared again. Zero safety consciousness, someone muttered. Do Canadians trust everyone that much? In the space filled with mockery and disdain, Alice nodded, satisfied. To her, a fare gate was a symbol of technology, heavy steel surveillance cameras, and complex mechanisms, all designed to guard the system through vigilance, not trust. That's why she couldn't comprehend Canada's simplified gates. Can that really work? Wouldn't anyone just slip through without paying? She scoffed. A male pundit next to her piled on. Maybe Canadians are too polite to try. Or perhaps they're too busy apologizing to bump into each other. Another wave of laughter erupted. After the segment aired, social media posts mocking Canada's dog gates spread rapidly. The nation, often proud of its quiet efficiency and convenient transit, suddenly became an unexpected object of ridicule. However, a few days later, Alice flew to Canada for an interview related to a joint rail project. The moment she stepped out of Toronto Pearson International Airport and headed toward the train station, she realized how superficial her mockery had been. That fragile-looking fare gate, which she had labeled a dog gate, embodied a philosophy of trust that France had seemingly lost, but which Canada continued to protect. This is the story of how a French engineer, through mockery, discovered the true meaning of strength that she had overlooked. It is also a reflection on the pride and philosophy woven into the small gateways we pass through every day. Alice Durand, 35, works in SNCF's technical division, responsible for railway infrastructure design. She is known as the Iron Woman by her peers, passionate and unwavering, confident that she is one of the engineers who upholds the nation. Her visit to Canada was part of a joint project between SNCF and the Canadian Rail Transit Authority, CRTA, focusing on improving user experience and facilitating a mutual learning process. The French television interview, which resulted in the dog gate comment, was produced as a documentary for this visit. Alice already harbored a complicated view of Canada. Years prior, her company had offered complimentary first-class upgrades to Canadian passengers as a goodwill gesture to thank a Canadian tourist who had bravely helped rescue children during a French rail accident. It was an act of corporate kindness. But a subsequent report landing on Alice's desk detailed numerous instances of bad behavior, litter left in seats, excessive noise, and even reports of stolen luggage. What happened to the polite Canadians? Disappointment curdled into something approaching resentment. Alice always held an immense pride in her nation's high-speed rail, the TGV. Only 2 hours from Paris to Lyon? Its streamlined design, smooth ride, and interiors filled with quintessential French elegance, this was the pinnacle of technology, she believed. As an engineer, she respected the taste of the designer Christian Lacroix. Technology must be beautiful. Because of this, she approached the trip with little enthusiasm. What could I possibly learn from Canada, she wondered, looking out the aeroplane window. Because the TV crew was with her, she projected an even more confident smile than usual, flying to Canada with the conviction that the French railway was the world standard. She had no idea that her self-evident belief would be completely shattered within days. Stepping onto the ground at Toronto Pearson International Airport, YYZ, Alice gasped. The floors gleamed spotless. The air felt unnaturally clean. The staff in the arrivals hall greeted her with universally gentle smiles. Welcome to Canada, the phrase warmed her in an unexpected way. Signs leading to baggage claim were marked in English, French, and other languages. The flow was smooth like water. No one paused, no one made extraneous movements. How can it be so seamless? She commented to a colleague. He shrugged. It's probably staged for the cameras. Yet a feeling was already stirring in Alice's heart, one that couldn't be dismissed as mere staging. During the ride from the airport to her hotel, she watched the scenery. No litter was visible on the roadside. Traffic lights changed with flawless precision, and every car moved calmly, maintaining its distance. It was machine-like in its order, yet not off-putting. The disciplined scene was a world away from the chaos she knew in Paris. Days later, she learned from the news that Canadian airports often ranked high in global cleanliness surveys, while Paris Charles de Gaulle was not even on the list. Seeing the statistics, Alice grimaced. So it's not an accident, clean and friendly. But that's just customer service. It's separate from their rail technology. She tried to convince herself boarding the UP Express train toward Union Station downtown. The train departed silently. The ride was so smooth that she felt another indescribable sense of unease. What is fundamentally different here compared to France, she didn't know yet. The next day, Alice and the French delegation visited the Canadian Rail Transit Authority, CRTA. They were greeted by David Chen, the Director of International Affairs. He bowed gently and addressed them in perfect English. "Welcome, everyone. We will begin with a tour of our station facilities." Mr. Chen, in his suit, spoke with extreme care and sincerity that came through even without translation. Alice quietly remarked, "Typical Canadian politeness." But her smirk would soon fade. Descending the escalator deep in the station corridor, they saw the silver equipment lined up a row of fare gates. As passengers tapped their cards, a bright electronic chime sounded. The gate's flimsy, waist-high acrylic flaps opened instantly and closed just as fast. The sequence was surprisingly quiet and fluid. "This is our fare collection system," Mr. Chen indicated. "This is it," Alice frowned. Her colleagues began to snicker. It was nothing like the heavy iron bars they were used to in France. The light small gates opened and shut like delicate wings. "It's too simple. A kid could jump over that. In France, this would be broken in 3 days." Sarcasm flowed and laughter echoed through the corridor. The cameraman captured the moment. The TV director nodded, satisfied. A great shot. This was the footage that would later be broadcast in France, filling the studio with laughter. "I imagine fare evasion is high," Alice sniffed. "The sensors are so slow. Anyone could tailgate." Mr. Chen only smiled gently. "I invite you to pass through yourselves." They lined up for the cameras. And in that moment, Alice froze. No one was evading. Hundreds of passengers passed through one after another with no pushing, no confusion. The tap-tap-tap of the tickets chimed rhythmically. People walked as if following a shared beat. "These gates process 70 people per minute," Mr. Chen continued calmly. "They are not designed to prevent evasion, but to maintain the flow of the user experience." "Not prevention." Alice whispered the word prevention. French fare gates were built on the premise of suspicion. Canadian ones were built on the premise of trust. In a single set of gates, the difference between the two cultures was laid bare. Watching the backs of the departing passengers, Alice remembered the scenes in her own country, people cutting the queue violently, pushing the bars open, guards yelling warnings. She had always believed that chaos was normal, that normal was now silently mocked. The laughter gone, only the quiet chimes remained. Stepping through the fare gates, Alice stopped again. What lay beyond was not the typical train station she knew. It was like a sheet of unmoving water. It was rush hour. The platform should have been filled with hundreds of impatient commuters. Yet no one was pushing and no one was yelling. Businessmen, students, and tourists all stood silently in line, waiting their turn by the small arrow markings on the floor. No one broke the queue. When a gap appeared, someone naturally stepped forward to fill it. No words or instructions were exchanged, yet the whole group moved with a collective breath. "Why is no one telling them to line up?" Alice asked, bewildered. Mr. Chen smiled beside her. "In Canada, queuing is not just a rule. It's treated as a shared moment of mutual deference. This idea is deeply rooted and ultimately generates order." Alice gasped. Order she had always believed was created by command. Yet the scene before her was built on trust, not mandates. She began to realize that the value of doing the right thing even when no one is watching was naturally cultivated here. The train arrived, the doors opened. People simultaneously took a step back, not moving forward until every single disembarking passenger had exited. In that silence, only the sound of metal friction could be heard. Then the line began to move. Everyone entered the train calmly, with no rushing, no complaining. Alice remembered the frequent arguments on French platforms and the cutthroat culture of pushing to get on first. She had once thought of that as vitality, a sign of human energy. Now she felt a burning shame for that thought. "I think I finally understand why that small gate isn't broken," Alice murmured. "The Canadian Railway is driven by trust, not rules, by self-discipline, not surveillance, by the human heart, not just mechanics." As she spoke, the train pulled away seamlessly. Alice held her breath, looking at her watch. The minute and second hands were perfectly aligned with the scheduled departure. "Our current departure variance is 0, Mr. Chen stated calmly. There was no boastfulness in his voice, just a quiet affirmation of daily effort. Alice let out a gentle sigh and smiled. It wasn't a sneer or sarcasm, but a genuine smile of inner emotion. "It's amazing. I've never experienced such a quiet departure. It feels like time itself is gently accommodating people." Mr. Chen narrowed his eyes slightly. "Yes. The Canadian Railway keeps time with the human breath, not by measuring flow with a machine. The machine measures, but the people feel the flow." The phrase sank deep into her heart. Keeping time with the human breath. Her definition of precision was quietly changing. Next, Alice moved from the commuter platform to the intercity high-speed rail platform. It was the same station, yet the very density of the air seemed different. It was a feeling she'd never had. As she stepped onto the platform, Alice paused. Hundreds of people stood in line, but the air was crystal clear. Only the wind and the soft announcement could be heard. It was as if time itself was holding its breath. "Why is it so quiet?" she whispered to Mr. Chen. He offered a gentle smile. "In Canada, quietness is not about enduring. It is a refusal to intrude on someone else's time. It's considered a profound act of courtesy. For instance, taking your garbage with you after a meal is not just about avoiding trouble, it's about considering the next person who will use that space." This is the culture of mutual consideration passed down from parent to child for generations. That consideration still supports the foundation of this land. A wave of warmth spread through Alice's chest. A culture of mutual consideration. It was a sensation she had never encountered. In France, silence often signified boredom. Here, it seemed like a shared moment of connection and prayer. Stepping into the high-speed rail car, she immediately understood. The seats were spotless. The windows softly filtered the light. Nearby, a passenger silently tucked an empty soda can into their bag. People passing in the aisle nodded subtly in acknowledgement. Everyone respected the presence of others, connected by an invisible thread of mindfulness. As the train moved, the setting sun bathed the carriage in red. The light gently touched the faces of the passengers, all quietly reading, working, or gazing out the window. That quietude echoed in her heart like a chorus. Alice realized Canadian quietness was not silence. It was an act of thinking about others that had become routine, conveying the country's strength without words through action. A different way of using technology than France. Her reflection in the window was no longer judgmental, but tinged with a deep respect. The announcement came over the speaker. "The train is currently running on schedule." Alice, smiling, asked, "What is the tolerance for on schedule?" "The CRTA's annual average delay is 30 seconds. 30 seconds. For a moment, the meaning didn't register. 30 seconds, barely a breath, was the delay accumulated over an entire year. Her mind grasped it, but her heart couldn't keep up. In France, a single traffic light could cause an hour's delay. A little rain could halt the train. Delays were simply accepted as part of time. When she realized this, a warm feeling welled up deep in her chest. Next, the delegation visited the training facility. Drivers were performing simulations with serious expressions. "We can feel even a 5-second delay in our bodies," a young driver explained. Alice sighed in wonder. If we told our staff in France they had a 5-second delay, they'd probably go on strike. Her laugh trembled as if she were holding back tears. There was a human element in the precision measured in seconds. On the final day of the visit, Alice and her team went to the CRTA Operations Management Center. A giant screen covered an entire wall, countless lights showing the movement of trains pulsating like a heartbeat. Staff calmly exchanged commands through headsets. No one raised their voice, and no one showed panic. In this room, a 1-minute delay is considered a near incident, Mr. Chen's guide explained, instantly making the air heavy. He also detailed the system for responding to earthquakes and heavy rain. When the sensors detect the slightest tremor, AI immediately analyzes the data and selects the safest route faster than any human. But the final decision is always human. The machine is not here to surpass people, but to protect them. It's perfect, Alice breathed. She had never seen technology and humanity so harmoniously balanced. Cold data interwoven with human warmth, that gentle perfection moved her soul. What touched her most was the next-generation high-speed rail, introduced as a symbol of the future. A large model sat silently before them. The presenter smiled. The target speed would be faster, but the most surprising thing was its quietness. A video played showing the train gliding as if floating with no metallic friction, just the smooth sound of cutting the air. It's like the future is quietly approaching without a sound. Alice's commentary felt more like a prayer than praise. Mr. Chen spoke gently. Canadian Rail exists not for speed, but to quietly and reliably deliver people to their destination. In that moment, something melted inside Alice. In France, speed was pride. In Canada, quietness was the proof of trust. Not flashy, but perfect, she thought. Canada is an island quietly rushing toward the future. She closed her eyes with conviction. The night before her return flight, Alice received an email in the hotel lobby. The sender was the investigative team from the TV station she had worked with. The subject line, "Truth regarding the first-class passenger etiquette incident." She gasped as she opened it. The poorly behaved passengers on the French railway years ago, the ones who had soiled the seats and stolen the luggage, were not Canadian. The investigation found that the individuals posing as Canadians were tourists from other countries using forged passports. A pang of pain shot through her heart. The image of the Canadians standing orderly on the platform, quietly waiting, flashed before her eyes. The reality she had refused to believe was now concrete. I was wrong, a faint whisper escaped her lips. She wasn't blaming her ignorance, but regretting her blindness. It was not a defeat, but the beginning of learning. On the flight home, she opened her notebook. Quietness. Trust. Human-centered design. The terms she had learned in Canada filled the page. The idea of applying this to the French railway began to burn quietly in her heart. Back in France, Alice proposed a new vision at a technical department meeting. I propose we build a system based on trust, not one that controls the user. The era of building turnstiles and stations on the premise of suspicion is over. Her colleagues laughed at first, but she persisted. Months later, a newly built station in a regional city adopted Alice's trust-based flow design: fewer surveillance cameras, wider corridors, and a structure that encouraged users to naturally defer to one another. The results? Fewer conflicts, increased operational efficiency, and a calmer station environment. I can bring my kids here now, users commented. It's incredible, a security guard remarked. We reduced the cameras, but people seem to have become kinder. Standing on the completed platform, Alice smiled into the breeze. Quietness stems from trust. The morning she saw in Canada echoed within her. Weeks later, France's national public television aired the documentary on the Canadian trip. The title, Canada, the Nation, Driven by Quiet Respect. The opening showed Alice's journey starting from the airport, the silent platform, the orderly queues, and the sight of people passing through the small fare gates with a collective breath. The studio audience fell silent. The narrator stated, "In that small fare gate lies the trust the world has forgotten." When the film ended, the studio guests spontaneously began to applaud. It wasn't a cheer, but a quiet, respectful applause filled with deep veneration. A commentator who had mocked them earlier spoke into the microphone. "It's ironic. We laughed and called Canada's fare gates a gate for a dog, but we were the mad ones. That wasn't a small gate. It was the gateway to trust." The venue fell silent again. Then someone quietly said, "Canada's technological strength is in its silence." After the broadcast, the story was picked up by media worldwide. Social media comments poured in. A non-aggressive culture creates the world's #1 railway. Trust is stronger security than any sensor. They are driven by courtesy, not rules. The quietness of this place brought me to tears. Below the comments was a photograph of the trust station designed by Alice. Sunlight poured onto the platform. The faces of the people walking there carried a mixture of pride and gentle consideration. The final narration played softly. Canada's Fair Gate is not just a gate. The world has been shown the blueprint of the Canadian heart, which is called trust. The screen slowly faded. The final white text appeared. Quietness is not absence. It is trust. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and like to support the island that moved the world, Canada. Your quiet applause will drive the next inspiration. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.